Don't you lads try anything. You might get me, but first I'll blast him right in the belly.
You know his face from 50 westerns. The person who always came through for everyone. But Randolph Scott's personal life made people in Hollywood look twice. His strange marriage to a rich woman from another state. His beach house was shared with another well-known star. When death finally took him, some family members found out something that made them cry. In secret, this simple man had made so much money that it changed their lives forever. The actor who didn't smile much on screen won in the end. Randy Scott was born in Orange County, Virginia, on January 23, 1898, but this wasn't where his family lived. It took place while they were visiting family. The 5 kids he has were all born in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was the only one who wasn't. George Grant Scott, his father, was an engineer in the textiles industry, and also North Carolina's first certified public accountant. That made him a leader. Lucille, his mother, came from a well-known and rich family in North Carolina. Randy was born into a family with a lot of money and smarts. His family came from Scotland and was well known in the South. He got off to a good start in life. He grew up in Charlotte in a big fancy house that is still there. In 1927 they moved into a big house that was made by the famous builder Louis Asbury. Randy knew what that kind of life was like. Friends who could get them things, private schools, and the calm security of someone who never had to worry about money. The school he went to was Woodbury Forest School in Virginia. It was more than just a school. It was a place where sons of wealthy families rose to power in the South. That school made him who he is today. He learned how to be calm, charming, and sure of himself that he could do anything. Randolph wasn't just a well-groomed young man, though. He was also sporty. He played baseball and football. He competed in swimming and horse races. It wasn't just a hobby. They were important and cost a lot of money. He wanted to be an all-American football player at Georgia Tech, but a bad back accident put an end to that dream. He then changed schools and went to the University of North Carolina to study textile engineering, just like his dad did. It's strange that the same sports, especially riding, later made him great for Western movies. He didn't need to act like he knew how to ride a horse. He could already. That made him look natural on TV. A lot of old Southern ideals shaped Randolph as well. He was in shows put on by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. These weren't your average plays. They showed their pride in the South, and had lots of big ideas like duty, loss, and giving up something important. Because of those roles, he picked up a soft, aristocratic Southern accent that added to his movie charm. He learned to be tough, proud, and proper from the way he was raised. That's the kind of man that people saw in his movies later on. The money from his family not only helped him, it completely changed his life. It was hard for many boys from the South to find work during World War I, but Randolph had a safety net. He didn't have to rush when he got back from the war. Because his dad knew so many people, he was able to get him a letter of introduction to Howard Hughes. Back in 1928, Randolph used that letter to get into Hollywood. He didn't need to begin at the bottom. He showed up with ease, good looks, and strong friends. That's not something that many people could do. Randy was only 19 years old when the U.S. started World War I in April 1917. In July of that year he joined the National Guard instead of living at home. He didn't wait like most men who joined the war effort did. In October he was given the rank of corporal. He was a sergeant by February 1918. He wanted to serve instead of going to West Point, even though his father tried to get him there. That choice showed how disciplined he was, and it fit with the brave roles he would play in later movies. He fought on the front lines in France. He was in the 2nd Trench Mortar Battalion, as part of a 2-man team. His job was risky. While the enemy was attacking, he sat in small bunkers and directed artillery fire. Before every task, he and his partner read pocket testaments and held on to their dog tags. He never talked about what he saw in public. His work was correct. He sent updates to make sure the artillery was aimed properly by doing math by hand. Men could die if he was wrong. That kind of stress changed him, and made him become the quiet, tough man people saw in his roles. He also learned skills in the service that Hollywood couldn't fake in the real world. He learned how to ride horses over rough ground. He trained with swords and guns. These weren't just props, they helped people stay alive. After that, when Randolph played soldiers and cowboys, it felt real because it was. Not only did he act like a hero, he had been there. Even though the war was over in November 1918, Randolph didn't rush home to become an artillery officer. He stayed in France and went to the school in Saumur. By May 1919, he was a second lieutenant. When he finally got back to the U.S., he went to Georgia Tech to try to reach a new goal, becoming a great football player. He became a member of a club and got back into sports, but the hurt he had before came back. That dream was over too. He moved again, this time to study engineering at the University of North Carolina. It wasn't long. The classroom wasn't as exciting as the sports field or the battlefield. He quit college and went to work for his dad's cloth company. He worked hard at that company. He worked as a bookkeeper, then as an inspector, and finally as an office manager. He paid attention and was responsible. He wasn't excited about that life though. It wasn't enough. He did something risky in 1927. He gave up a stable job to do something very risky. Something strange happened in 1929 while they were playing at the Los Angeles Country Club. He was paired with Howard Hughes. Yes, that Howard Hughes. He was a strange and wealthy man who flew planes and made movies. Scott had no idea that this golf game would make everything different. Hughes took notice of Scott's good looks, tall build and southern charm. He was the kind of guy Hollywood needed. Hughes gave him a small unnamed part in the far call by the end of the game. It wasn't much, a small part in a movie. It was a start though. Scott might not have become a movie star if he hadn't skipped golf that day. Scott learned that looks alone weren't enough after that lucky break. He had to be skilled. He signed up at the Pasadena Community Playhouse because of this. This was the best acting school on the West Coast. Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman, who would go on to become stars, went there to learn. Scott did a lot of work. He learned how to move, sing and act on stage. Great director Cecil B. DeMille came to see a play in 1931. He saw Scott, and thought it was cool. He said that kid has something that Hollywood can't teach. That moment gave Scott new opportunities. He was no longer just a lucky player. He was turning into a real actress. Something strange happened behind the scenes of the Western movie, The Virginian, that same year. Our Virginia accent was hard for Gary Cooper, the star. A real Virginian would be the best person to teach him. Scott stepped in to show Cooper how to play. His role wasn't the main one. No one even gave him credit, but he made Cooper sound more real, and reviewers took notice. Cooper became a bigger star because of that movie, while Scott stayed in the background. Still, it helped the two men become friends for life and showed how kind and professional Scott really was. Things got better in 1932. Scott made a deal with Paramount Pictures. Back then that meant a lot. Hot Saturday was his first big movie. He worked with Nancy Carroll, and a young Cary Grant in it. The movie made a lot of noise with its brave plot, but behind the scenes something else happened. Scott and Grant became good friends. They even shared a beach house in Malibu for more than 10 years. There was talk, speculation, and magazine articles about them. But the truth was easy to see. It's not often that two Hollywood stars become close friends. During this time, Scott's responsibilities kept growing. He wasn't just there anymore. Of course his good looks and southern charm helped. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall and had a cool, sure air about him that people liked. He was getting bigger parts by 1934. He played loyal friends and love rivals a lot of the time, but he always brought something new to the screen. On paper, Randolph Scott's first marriage looked great. On March 23, 1936, he married Marion DuPont Somerville. She was very rich because her grandfather started the DuPont chemical business, and left his family a lot of money. He was 38 years old. She was 41 years old. If you liked horse races, she was a queen. And he was going up quickly in Hollywood. The news didn't even talk about their wedding until months after it happened. Since Scott was Marion's best man at her first wedding, Their own wedding felt like the next step in a long friendship. However, things did not work out behind the scenes. Marion spent the night in Virginia at her 55-room Montpelier estate, which was once the home of President James Madison. Scott worked all the time in Los Angeles. His gym was in her basement, but because he was 6 feet 4 inches tall, they had to dig a hole in the floor for him to stand up straight while he worked out. They didn't spend much time together. Marion did not enjoy Hollywood. Her horse Battleship made history in 1938 when it won England's Grand National Steeplechase. It was the first American-bred horse to do so. She wasn't able to go to the party in New York. Scott went instead of her. They were married from far away for 3 years before they split up in 1939. There were no fights or scandals, just two people going their separate ways. Even though they didn't have any children, Marion kept the Scott name until she died in 1983. A quiet way to show respect that never went away. In 1935, a year before they got divorced, Scott moved in with Cary Grant. It was big and beautiful, 5,530 square feet, and they lived in Malibu. A lot of people called it Bachelor Hall. They were young, rich and pretty, and they were always seen on camera playing golf or relaxing on the beach. They even arranged pictures of them working out together. And with pictures of them working out together, the press couldn't get enough of it. And a hopper who writes a gossip piece made fun of them. Lynn Lombard, an actress, made fun of the fact that Scott paid the bills and Grant mailed them. Because they were so close, they made people talk, especially since Grant got married for a short time, and then moved back in with Scott after his divorce. They lived together for 12 years. Some people said they were just friends. Some people said it was more than that. We'll never be sure. But in 1944, studios put pressure on them to end their shared living situation and get married. They were friends for life though. Bonds like that were very rare in Hollywood. Scott didn't just make westerns in the late 1930s and early 1940s. He was everywhere. He was in a musical with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and a comedy with Mae West in 1936. Had the part of Hawkeye in The Last of the Mohicans. He almost got the part of Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind, but Leslie Howard beat him out. He played the lead role in Roberta Pittsburgh, and even Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. Critics loved how he could switch between styles, being charming one minute and serious the next. He wasn't just another cowboy yet. Those years changed him. They helped him find his voice and get a lot of fans. He stopped switching between styles in the early 1940s. He lived in westerns and wore a cowboy hat like it was his natural hairstyle. Directors really liked him. Michael Curtis once said that Scott was the only gentleman he had ever met in the business. In a business full of divas, that meant something. C.B. DeMille sent him to the Pasadena Playhouse to train early on, before giving him big parts. He paid attention, learned, and never caused trouble. He worked with famous people like Henry King, Jesse James, and George B. Seitz, who was the last of the Mohicans. They looked up to his control. He was always on time, ready, and did a good job. He lived up to his image as a Southern gentleman behind the scenes. 2 parts, changed everything. The Last of the Mohicans showed in 1936, that he could be the director of an action movie, with only 92 minutes. It was short, sharp and full of thrills. Scott's Hawkeye was a brave hero. After that, Jesse James came along in 1939. Scott, Tyrone Power, and Henry Fonda, all played Will Wright. In the US and Canada, the movie made more than $2.3 million. That year, only Gone with the Wind and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington did better. One scene with a horse got so much attention that it made Hollywood take steps to protect animals on set. That's how big the movie was. Scott was ready to serve when the United States joined World War II. He tried to join the Marines, but was turned down because he hurt his back. He didn't just sit it out though. He did shows for troops on military sites, with comedian Joe Dorita. He grew food for the government on his own land. He kept people up with war movies like Gung Ho, To the Shores of Tripoli, Bombardier and Corvette K-225. These movies were more than just fun. They made us feel better. Scott became both a real and a made-up symbol of American power. He got married to Patricia Stillman in 1944. They were married for over 40 years, until he died in 1987. They took in Christopher and Sandra as their own children. Scott's family life stayed strong and private, while other Hollywood couples went out and got married quickly. He felt calm in a way that many stars never do. He was also good at business. He began run-own productions with director Harry Joe Brown in the late 1940s. The name was a mix of their names, Randolph and Brown. Most artists back then didn't have any power. Studios made all the calls, but with run-own, Scott chose his own projects, which were mostly westerns. He was able to be more artistic and got paid more. This move changed his last few years in movies. The movie Bad Man's Territory came out in 1946. Scott played Mark Rowley, a police officer who deals with criminals like Jesse James and the Dalton Gang. $557,000 was made from the movie. That was a lot of money. People really liked it. It led to 2 more movies, and Scott was always a big draw at the movies. Not all of Randolph Scott's fame happened quickly, but between 1950 and 1953, something amazing took place. He made it into the top 10 of America's favorite male stars, and stayed there for 4 years in a row. Any star would rarely do that, but it was especially rare for someone who made westerns, which didn't usually do well at the box office. Even stranger was the fact that Scott was already in his 50s, but his movies made a lot of money. In 1950, he was making $100,000 a movie, which is about $1.3 million today. People from all over the country, from towns to the country, stood in line to see his quiet but strong brand of justice. His fans ranged from kids with wide eyes to tough farmers, and everyone in between. He turned into more than a star. He became a sign. But that rise wasn't just about the number of people, it was about how he told stories, and the stories he told. In the 1947 show Trail Street, he played Bat Masterson, a tough cop who was sent to a wild Kansas town to clean it up. There was more to the story than just action. In just 3 months, it brought in $360,000 in profits. Gunfighters came out the same year. After killing his best friend, Scott was a broken man trying to leave his violent past behind. He showed real, quiet, and strong pain. In 1949, he went even further with The Walking Hills, a dirty, dusty treasure hunt in the desert. Some parts of that movie were very western, and some parts were very noir. Scott was very cool, steady and deeply human in the middle of it all. His look changed as his parts got bigger. Scott's face had changed by the late 1940s, because it was shot outside in the wind and sun. It was tougher and clearer. He didn't try to hide his age, though he leaned into it. He felt more real because of his rough skin and cold eyes. He thought this man had seen some pretty bad things. Even when he wasn't talking, his face told stories. People thought of old stories like William S. Hart, when they saw Scott's worn-out look, which made him stand out even more. He didn't need big scenes or lines that stood out. He had the power to make a whole scene heavy with just one look. After that, the most important part of his work began. They worked together on 7 westerns, from 1956 to 1960. It wasn't a big-budget blockbuster. They were thin, tight, and full of meaning. Each one showed a different side of the western hero, such as his pain, his doubts, and his loneliness. There are now 10 movies in the run-on cycle. They are 7 Men from Now, The Tall T, Decision at Sundown, Buchanan Rides Alone, Westbound, Ride Lonesome, and Comanche Station. It was a lonely, dangerous world, where doing the right thing cost a lot. They got rid of the old cliches, and showed the Western for what it really was. In 7 Men from Now, Scott played a man who felt guilty all the time. Someone had killed his wife in a theft. He felt bad about himself, because he turned down easier work out of pride, which made her take the job that killed her. He was driven in every step he took, and every man he met, by that pain. In the role of his foe, played by Lee Marvin, a charming killer, who showed Scott's darker sides. Their fight wasn't just physical, it was also close to home. The movie did not end with a win. At the end, there was still a man carrying his load, knowing that getting even couldn't bring peace. The tall T got even deeper the next year. In one scene, Pat Brennan, played by Scott, tried to trade candy with a bull. That one moment said it all. In a way, he wasn't a bad guy. He liked to think things through and pick calm and wit over raw power. The story put him in a dangerous position with killers and a woman who wasn't guilty. But guns weren't the only thing that was dangerous. It was up to them. Could he help her? Was he able to trust his enemies? Could he leave? The stress never went away, and every choice hurt a lot. The movie is now in the National Film Registry because of this. In 1959, Scott played one of the most painful parts of his life in Ride Lonesome. He played Ben Brigade, a bounty hunter, but he didn't want the money, just the right kind of punishment for him. His wife had been taken and killed years before. There was still the man who did it. Brigade caught the killer's brother, but not for money. They did it as a lure. In the very last scene, he burns down the tree where his wife was hung. That fire wasn't just the end of a chase, it helped them get better. Still, strong and memorable. The next stop was Comanche Station in 1960. It was Scott's last Western before he retired. It was a wonderful goodbye. Jeff Cody was the character he played. Cody had been looking for his wife, who had been taken by the Comanches, for 10 years. He saved another woman because he thought that maybe, just maybe, he'd find her. She wasn't the one though. He kept his word though and took her home, making sure she is safe from bad guys along the way. His search and hope did not end when the battle was over. That was the last message Scott sent. The good guys don't always win. They just keep going sometimes. The movie Ride the High Country came out in 1962, and was just another cheap Western. It wasn't well known that Sam Peckinpah was the director yet. They didn't like his ideas because he was young, stubborn and full of them. From the start there was trouble with the process. There were plans for MGM to film in the beautiful Mammoth Lakes, but the weather wouldn't let them. The company then told everyone and everything to move hundreds of miles away to Los Angeles' Bronson Canyon. That change was a bad idea. Peckinpah was mad about the choice, so he made sure the cast and team stayed drunk for the 6-hour bus ride back to Los Angeles. Things got even more crazy after that. Joseph Vogel, head of MGM, fell asleep while watching an early cut of the movie. He said it was the worst movie he had ever seen when he woke up. The movie didn't even get a fair chance at MGM. It was put on the bottom half of double attractions. It didn't do well at all in the US. There was something else in Europe though. Ride the High Country became one of MGM's biggest hits outside of the United States, and slowly word spread about the movie. It was chosen to be kept alive in the National Film Registry in 1992. A show that had a lot of problems turned out to be a classic. Randy Scott was at the center of it all. That's what he did. An old ex-cop who is having a hard time keeping up with how things are changing. The story takes place around 1905, not long after the end of the Old West. The worn, serious and honest look on Scott's face was right for the part. He was pulled between greed and honor, between gold and loyalty. On set, Scott and his co-star Joel McCrea were both going through their own twilight. They were real-life stars who played guys out of time, which gave the movie a quiet power. A lot more was added by the photography. The movie felt like a goodbye thanks to Lucien Ballard's soft fall-colored shots, not just to the country, but also to the old Western movies in Hollywood. This wasn't like other cowboy movies. It had heart, and Scott gave one of the most moving shows he's ever done. It might be the best or the most passionate. Scott agreed. After making the movie, he quit acting for good. He didn't want to keep working only to get smaller parts or lose his fame. He got his point across through Gil Westrom. Everything was there in that one show. There is doubt, pride, sorrow, and redemption. Scott told his friends that he would never do better. He didn't try though. He chose to leave on his own. Scott was smart in real life too though. He was smarter after that. He didn't go away when he quit in 1962. He paid attention to business. He was better at that game than almost everyone in Hollywood. He was worth $100 million by the mid-1960s. These days,
That's about $280 million. A lot of artists didn't think that way, but Scott did. He bought early, held on, and saw the prices go up. He had more than 2 grand homes. He owned a lot of land, mostly in San Fernando and Palm Springs. By 1965, those buildings were worth more than $100 million, all by themselves. Lots of people moved to Palm Springs and San Fernando, and both cities grew very quickly. Scott was the first person to see it coming. That wasn't all he did. He helped build the Park Ridge Country Club in Corona, California, in 1927. Over time, that course turned into Cresta Verde, a place where stars like Lucille Ball, Burt Lancaster and Clark Gable loved to hang out. Scott liked golf, but this was for work. This course is one of the oldest in the U.S., and people still like to play there. Few people were able to combine his personal interest with making money the way he did. Randolph Scott killed himself in 1987, but he left behind more than just movies. He still had a lot of money, about $100 million. He had done better than most, even when inflation was taken into account. Cary Grant's fortune, on the other hand, was worth about $130 million today. The one with Katharine Hepburn, around $30 million. Scott had scores that were out of this world, but in his later years, the tough cowboy began to fade. He had issues with his heart, and had trouble breathing. He went to the hospital more than once because of pneumonia. He was weak, and needed full-time care by 1987. His death was peaceful and quiet on March 2nd at home in Beverly Hills, 99. The friend of his, Cary Grant, had died not long before. Only 25 family members showed up to Scott's funeral. It took place near where he grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. The service was led by Reverend Billy Graham. President Ronald Reagan wrote in a letter that Scott was one of the best actors in Hollywood.